Nathan Mathisen. You can follow me on Twitter at Nathan Mathisen. And on today's episode, we're going to be talking about obviously the game last night with Washington beating Stanford 20-13 in what I would call a nice old-fashioned barn burner. As the final score 20-13, low scoring, but the first half was very slow. It was a game of field goals to start. At one point, I thought the Huskies wouldn't score a touchdown, nor would Stanford the whole game the way it started. But the keys for Washington, which is what I'm going to be starting off touching on, the key was the run game. All season long, all last year to all Jimmy Lake's whole time at UW, he's hammered one thing: run the ball, run the ball, run the ball. And then on defense, stop the run, stop the run, stop the run. That's what he talks about. That's what he preaches. That's his play style. That's how he wants to win games. And against Stanford last night, that's how Washington won the game. Washington's run game won them that game. Not only Washington's run game, but their run defense stepped up big. As all season long, it seemed like Washington on defense against the run had been getting gashed. Against the run, UW ranked 108th in the nation. So they were not stopping people on the ground. Yet against Stanford, now this was a game, I guess, if the defense didn't come to play against the run, nor the offense for Washington come to play running the game, then I don't know what to say, because Stanford was the worst ranked run defense. Yeah, worst ranked run defense in the Pac-12. Overall, Stanford's run defense was 115th. So they average over 200 yards per game against them on the ground. And Washington did that. They went for over 200 yards. They came in with the game plan, which it's the game plan that they come in every single week. Only I think this week it just happened to work because it fit with what you want to do against Stanford. When you're playing Stanford, you want to run the ball. And Washington came out and did that. They had a number of carries. They had 42 carries. Washington ran the ball 42 times, averaged 5.5 yards a carry, had 229 yards. So they did great. There were constantly holes. They were constantly getting nice big chunk plays on the ground. And when you're able to get 5 yards through the ground on the first play of a series or the first play of a new set of downs, then you're automatically in plus because you're ahead of the chains, kind of. You're now, instead of being in 2nd and 8 or 2nd and 7 or even 9, what they'd been in all the other previous games, Washington finds themselves in 2nd and 5, which in 2nd and 5, it opens up the playbook. You can take more risks, kind of, because you can do anything. You can run it again if you please, which Washington did that a number of times. Not a big surprise there. Or you can throw it down the field in 2nd and 4, 2nd and 5, because you're still in a manageable 3rd down, even if you get 0 yards on the next play. So that helped Washington's offense really find their touch, find their momentum, find their identity finally. It was kind of just a long time coming for these Huskies on the ground. And then as for the other side of the ball, on the defense, Washington's run defense came up huge. Stanford only had 71 yards on the ground. And it was like watching Washington play against another school, only it's Stanford's running offense that can't produce, because that's how it's been for the Huskies run game the whole year, as you know, watching the games, not getting anything. And now here it is, the opposing team struggles to get anything because the Huskies defense, they kind of switched it up a bit. I noticed on a few plays they had Kyler Gordon in the slot instead of Mckee, kind of a bigger guy than Mckee. I think Kyler's 6'1", Mckee's more 5'10", maybe 5'11", so a little bit bigger, maybe a better run stopper. They moved Buki back to safety, kind of which I always thought just Buki's playing style screamed safety to me. It screams kind of Tyrann Mathieu type, free safety, just going all over the field, kind of roaming around. So I think that could be a good fit for Buki if they keep playing him back at safety, because he has great ball awareness. He has great ball skills. I mean, he got the interception in the end of the game, and he the whole defense really just played great. And Kyler Gordon, again, getting to him being in the slot guy, being the nickel corner, he he is like Elijah Molden. Not saying Buki isn't, but Kyler Gordon loves to come up and make the tackle, and he's a bigger guy, which Buki loves coming up to make the tackles, but Buki's not a bigger guy. So when a running back's one-on-one with Buki, they might be able to get through him, break the tackle more easily than a guy like Gordon. So that could be a strategy UW uses more often, maybe switching Buki to safety, Kyler Gordon to slot, and then they had, I believe it was Michelle Powell actually playing the other corner position in place of Kyler Gordon. So that's going to be something to keep your eye on. Do the Huskies keep that defense? Because it clearly worked. I mean, like I said, 71 yards on the ground for Stanford, which you wouldn't have expected the Huskies defense to hold a team under 100 yards, as they'd been allowing over 200 yards consistently. So getting them under 200 yards was going to be an accomplishment. But here they get them under 100 yards, which was huge for Washington. But again, it was against Stanford, which Stanford wasn't the best running the ball. I mean, they ranked 123rd in their rushing offense. They averaged only 94.3 yards per game. So it's still, though, it's big. The Huskies are clearly building momentum with these last few wins, and they're going to need that momentum going up against Oregon next week. But to the game, still talking Stanford here, something to kind of critique a bit was just finishing the drives. They had, or to open the game, UW went punt, field goal, field goal, field goal. That was the first half. They only had 4 possessions the first half of the game, and 1 was a punt, 3 were field goals. And all the field goals that Washington took, even in the second half as well, they were all within 40 yards. So each time the Huskies were nearing the red zone or in the red zone in some of these cases, yet they weren't able to just finish the drive. They weren't able to get 6, which, again, Stanford, it didn't cost them, as Stanford had their own issues on the offensive side of the ball. But against a team like Oregon, if Washington isn't able to finish drives, then they're going to be in for a very, very long night, as Oregon will put up points, and they can put up points in a hurry, as you saw against Colorado, putting up a few touchdowns really in like the last couple minutes of the game, pretty much. So for Washington, they need to finish drives. And it all starts with just execution. I mean, that's kind of what it is for everything, though. Execution. Washington has to execute the plays. If they execute the plays, they can work. They also, though, sometimes some of these guys have to make a play out there. Mckee has to break a tackle here and there. Rome Odunze, Jayla Mcmillan, Terrell Bynum, they got to beat the one-on-one coverage, and then you got to get a perfect pass from Morris in some cases. And it just everything needs to come together to finish a drive, as Washington was left kicking field goals. And I bet every Husky fan was out there thinking the same thing I was thinking. Each time Peyton Henry came on to kick the field goal, please don't miss it. Please don't miss it. Because Peyton Henry has not been a good kicker for Washington, I will say. He's missed a number of kicks that are very makeable. Yet last night against Stanford, he was on his A game, so he gets an early little shout out even before I talk about the other players who succeeded. Peyton Henry, definitely balled out last night. I mean, he went 4 for 4 on his field goals, and I mean, none of them were the thing is none of them were long field goals. I think the longest one he kicked was 37 yards. So they were all just him doing his job essentially. But again, Washington will need to keep improving and keep finishing these drives off, as you can't beat Oregon with field goals. So getting on to who disappointed last night. I mean, in that game, there weren't a lot of players who just stuck out as disappointing. I guess I'll start off just with the main guy, I guess, the guy who it seems like a weekly occurrence. He's on this list for me, and that's Dylan Morris. Against Stanford, it was no different than any of the previous weeks for him. He didn't have any turnovers, but it was the same Dylan Morris all Husky fans know. The dink and dunk Morris, just taking the safe routes, taking the safe plays, taking the little check downs, not taking too many risky passes, not airing it out often. And I mean, that it showed up in his stats for him not airing it out, as he was 17 of 25 for 146 yards and one touchdown on that last drive. But I mean, even with 146 yards, it was even less impressive for most of the game. At halftime, he was 10 for 14, 70 yards. He's being accurate. He's not throwing interceptions. He's being smart with the ball, which is something you want from a quarterback. But at one point, Morris is going to have to take that risk. He's going to have to throw it into double coverage sometimes, and the receiver is going to have to make a big play for him. So that's the number one disappointing player for me. Just Morris, his inability to be willing to risk it, to be willing to make the big pass, as he's more than content, it appears, or I know as we've watched him this year and last year, he's more than content if his first read is not open, looking at the check down right away. He's more than content doing that instead of scanning second read, third read, going back to the first read, or instead of throwing it into a tight window, which could get you 50 yards, he's more than content checking it down to the running back for 3 yards, which that's something. I mean, some people might like that. It's a person. It's like it's a person to person basis on what they like. It's a preference. Some people like a quarterback that's cautious. Jimmy Lake clearly does. Jimmy Lake loves Dylan Morris. He loves his ability to hold the ball, and that speaks towards Jimmy Lake's mindset of who he is as a coach, and that's a defensive coach. He's a defensive coach. He wants his quarterback to protect the ball because he knows what defenses want the turnovers. Lake knows that. So he wants his quarterback not to get the turnovers and for them to rely on the defense. It's all about defense for Lake. And it makes sense, former co-defensive coordinator at UW here before he was promoted to head coach. So for Morris, I mean, this is just what we're going to get from him. We're not going to get a quarterback who will consistently sling it out across the field. And that also speaks towards the game plan. That also speaks towards John Donovan's offense, which is called a pro-style offense, but it's more of a cautious offense. It's more of a not trying to risk it too often offense, because you don't see too many shots take place in these games. You don't see too many deep balls being thrown by Morris. So that he was the first player that disappointed. Another guy, I guess maybe Cade Otton. Cade Otton, he came into the year with a lot of expectations. People thought that he would be like the next great tight end out of Washington. But so far in the year, he hasn't shown up in the receiving game too much. I don't know how his run blocking's been or pass protection when he stayed back, but I guess it can't be super good because the run game hasn't been too good. But overall, Cade Otton, I expected more from him in the receiving game. At least he was hyped up like he was going to be more in the receiving game. And so far in the year, I know he missed a couple games, but he's got 20 catches for 120 catches for 194 yards and just one touchdown on the year. That's, I mean, I guess teams might be double coveraging him, having safety help, but look at week one really was kind of like the wow, he's going to have this great year. He had 8 catches for 82 yards against Montana, again, Montana, but Montana beat the Huskies, so that shows something. So since that 8 catch game, his most catches he's had is 3. He's had 3 catches, 2 catches, 3 catches, 2 catches, and 2 catches in the games he's played. So he overall has not been targeted that often, which frankly, that surprises me even more. I mean, because Cade Otton is like a safety blanket, in my opinion. He never was that tight end that was the Hunter Bryants, where they're a vertical threat, a great vertical threat, like wide receiver type. Cade Otton to me is the prototypical tight end who you will send on routes anywhere from little flare routes right off the line of scrimmage to 10-yard in route, 10-yard drag routes, and little out routes like that. He's not going to be the guy you send on verts or big, deep post routes. Now, can he do those things? Yes. But his skill sets is more in his catching, his hands, I believe, and just his possession catches. He's a possession catcher and a red zone target. I mean, he's 6'5", 250 pounds. He's got a great body to him for a tight end. So the Huskies need to, I think, better utilize him and better get him the ball, because if it hits his hands, he's going to catch it more often than not, in my opinion. So just he's someone who's disappointed just a bit with me. And I don't know how much of that is his fault. I mean, if he's not getting the ball thrown to him, nothing he can do about his catches. But I don't know. Maybe he's not getting as open as he had been in previous years, perhaps. Or it's just that play calls that are being called aren't designed for him. So the Huskies will have to figure that out eventually. As against Oregon, he would be a huge piece to really have for Dylan Morris to use as almost a safety blanket against a great Oregon team. But now going on from disappointments to who shined, and that is a lot of players. But starting off the list, I have to go with Carson Bruner, who maybe the not too many casual or just some Husky fans who aren't like all up in the knowledge know about Carson Bruner, as he's a freshman, redshirt freshman, I believe it is, because he was on the team last year, but I don't think he played at all during that 4-game season. And then in fall camp, spring camp, and fall camp, he was noticed. He was a guy who reporters saw, and he made a impact in the practices. He made a couple good plays at times. So he was someone that you could keep an eye on. And now with Edefwan Ulofoshio out for the year, Ryan Bowman also out for the year. I believe it was reported either this morning or last night. I think someone reported that he had a shoulder injury that might put him out for the year. So now with all that happening, Carson Bruner is stepping up. He stepped up big last night. I mean, he made some huge plays. He had 15 total tackles, 11 solo tackles. He also had a sack. So he was doing it all for the Huskies in a position that, frankly, they needed help at. The run game or the run defense relies on linebackers coming up and making plays and stopping them. And I guess that hadn't been happening. Linebackers for the Huskies, Edefwan's a great player, but he hadn't been, I think, getting up the field, getting to the line of scrimmage and meeting the running back. Ulofoshio appeared to be more meeting him at where he was. So more 5 yards past the line of scrimmage was where Ulofoshi was getting there. Carson Bruner was flying up there and making huge plays all night long. So he definitely shined for him, and he's going to need to keep on doing that in order for the Huskies to keep winning. Another guy who shined was Sean McGrew and Cameron Davis. They both, in my opinion, had their best games as a I don't know about as a Husky. McGrew's been here a while, but they had their best games of the season by far. McGrew had 19 carries for 114 yards, didn't get in the end zone, but he was just consistently getting yards each time he touched the ball. He averaged 6 yards a carry. So each time McGrew was getting the ball, they were getting out of the chains. They were getting to that second and short, second and medium, or they were getting a first down, which was huge for the Huskies with McGrew playing great. But then put in Cameron Davis, who that was his best game as a Husky. I can say that with 100% confidence. He had 18 carries for 99 yards. Again, he was getting huge chunks each time he touched the ball, averaging 5.5 yards a carry. Now, neither one of them scored a touchdown, but they were key throughout the night. They really helped take the pressure off of Dylan Morris and made it so Dylan Morris didn't have to make too many big time throws and make too many tight window passes. As the run game for Washington, like I mentioned earlier, was on point with them going for 229 yards against Stanford, which when the run game is on, everything seems to flow better for Washington. When the run game is off, it seems like Washington takes a while to adjust. When the opposing team hits Washington with a big uppercut right out the gate, it takes Washington a little while to adjust and to counter them. That's why these games for Washington have been, they've been late comebacks are needed or holding off the opposing team late. Against Stanford, that was needed, but it wasn't needed because of that. It wasn't needed because they took time to adjust. As Washington's game plan they rolled in, running the ball was perfect against Stanford, just as I mentioned above or earlier, with Stanford struggling against the run. But it was perfect. Stanford couldn't stop the Huskies' run all night long, and it led to the Huskies getting easy chip shot field goals. You want touchdowns, but they ended up just getting those chip shot field goals. So overall, McGrew and Cameron Davis both really excelled against Stanford. Another guy I'll mention is Jayla Mcmillan. Mcmillan, he had the touchdown, of course, that won the game for the Huskies on their final drive with that. He burned his player on that one, so he got open and he was getting open consistently. McMillan has been all year long, I feel, the best receiver on the Huskies. He's been the best pass catcher for Washington. And that's what I always thought. I always looked at McMillan as having great potential. McMillan, in my opinion, has NFL potential. He's got a great body type, great size, great speed, great hands. He's a solid route runner. He's got to shore up some things. But overall, he has the abilities and the potential to be amazing at the position. He had 6 catches for 84 yards against Stanford last night and was just there for Morris. When Morris needed a pass, he was going to McMillan more often than not. And the next up, of course, another receiver who played great was Odunze, who McMillan and Odunze have the potential to be a great pair. Maybe not on the John Ross Dante Pettis level at UW, but maybe they do. But they both have great size. They both have great speed. They've both had issues with drops, but that's gone away this season kind of more often, knock on wood. So overall, the Huskies receiving core played great last night. It's weird. Morris didn't throw for many yards or make many completions. He had 17 total completions, and 12 of them went to Dunze and McMillan. That just shows the chemistry they've been able to produce. Another guys who shined, just the entire defense, I guess you got to say overall, because of what they did against Stanford, holding them on the ground, and then through the air also, Tanner Mckee, he had 194 yards, which is more yards than most teams throw for against Washington, as Washington is the number one ranked passing defense with yards allowed per game. But he had those 2 interceptions Mckee threw, 0 touchdowns. And just overall, the Huskies defense was kind of suffocating. They had 3 sacks on the day. Voy had those back to back, if I recall correctly, which was just big. Because when you get pressure on the opposing team's quarterback, the rest of the game for the defense just flows off of that. Because if you aren't getting pressure, it's leaving the defensive backs out there to cover for longer periods of time. When you can get pressure in a 2 seconds, 3 seconds, defensive backs don't have to be locked on their mans for 4 seconds, which is it's not much of a difference, just a couple seconds, but it's a lifetime out there for the defensive back in one-on-one coverage, it can seem like. So overall, the Huskies had a number of guys who shined, and rightfully so. I mean, they played a great game. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't what you'll play. If they play like that against Oregon, they won't win. But against Stanford, they played a game that led them to win. They weren't able to finish, but they put themselves in position to score over and over again. And they got field goals out of it. And the defense then put the offense in a position for that, as the defense held Stanford. The defense forced Stanford to punt the ball and to really not score. As simple as that. So now moving on from Stanford, looking ahead to Oregon, which the game against Oregon, it's gonna be a tough one. Oregon is good, that's for sure. I mean, they're 7-1. I think they're 10th, 7th in the country. They rank. They're coming off a win against Colorado. They won 52-29, which when I saw that score, actually, I was a little surprised because it looked like Colorado was coming back a bit, but I guess not really. Actually, now looking at it, Oregon kind of maintained a few score lead throughout the game. So Oregon this whole season's been perfect aside from the blip against Stanford, which, hey, Huskies just beat Stanford, so it's a possibility the Huskies win against Oregon, but they're going to need to come out with a perfect game plan, and that perfect game plan is not just running the ball, because that will not beat Oregon, a team that puts up points in a hurry. I mean, they're putting up, let's check here, that they average 36 points per game. Washington averages, if I'm remembering correctly, like about 20 points a game it was. Washington averages. So Washington is going to have to pass the ball. They're going to have some big plays against Oregon in order to come out with a win. And they're also going to have to get lucky. They're going to have to get a few things falling their way. They're going to have to get a few turnovers against Oregon, maybe a few dumb mistakes by Oregon that screw them over and help out Washington, because Washington's defense is going to be huge in this game. If Washington's defense is able to hold Oregon to maybe 30 points, like 31 points, so 4 touchdowns and a field goal. If Washington is able to hold Oregon to just 31 points, it gives Washington a chance. Now, if Oregon gets up to in the 40 range, then Washington probably has no chance, because I don't see the Husky offense as being able to put up 40 against Oregon. I see them putting up 30 as a stretch. So it's going to be a tough game. The keys are definitely going to be turnovers. If Washington is able to hold onto the ball, keep possession, well, they're able to get turnovers from Oregon, then anything can happen. But in all likelihood, it won't be a pretty game for Washington. My prediction for the game is, let's see, coming up with it on the spot here, I think I'll go UW 17, Oregon 31. I think Oregon gets just 31 points, but I think UW only puts up 17. I think their offense struggles. I think their defense at times basically folds over, but other times they'll hold them. All right, but that is all the time I have for today, it looks like. Thank you very much for joining me once again. This was Husky Dash with Dash Sports TV, where you can follow Dash Sports TV on all platforms, Twitter, Instagram, everything at Dash Sports TV. Make sure to hit a subscribe for our YouTube channel and put the post notification bell on so you know when we're posting content, as Dash Sports is posting content for a number of the Pac-12 schools, and they also have an NFL Dash Sports show posting NFL content every week. So this has been Husky Dash with Nathan Mathisen, me, where you can follow me on Twitter at Nathan Mathisen. But I'll see you again next weekend talking about the Oregon game. Will it be a Husky win? I don't know, but we'll find out next weekend. Thank you very much.